Coming up on One Detroit, we team up with BridgeDetroit for a conversation with Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan about the city's progress and challenges during his tenure. Plus, we'll remember the late poet Nikki Giovanni in a wide-ranging interview about her life and career. And we'll give you some suggestions on how to spend the St. Patrick's Day weekend. It's all coming up next on One Detroit.
From Delta faucets to Behr paint, Masco Corporation is proud to deliver products that enhance the way consumers all over the world experience and enjoy their living spaces. Masco, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
Support also provided by the Cynthia and Edsel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit PBS.
DTE Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit PBS. Among the state's largest foundations committed to Michigan-focused giving, we support organizations that are doing exceptional work in our state. Learn more at dtefoundation.com.
Nissan Foundation, and viewers like you.
Just ahead on One Detroit. In honor of Women's History Month, we'll revisit a conversation with the late Nikki Giovanni about her literary career and a documentary on her life. And we'll run down some of the events taking place this weekend in Metro Detroit. But first up, One Detroit partnered with BridgeDetroit for an in-depth conversation with Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan as he completes his final term in the city's highest office. Duggan has announced he's running for governor next year as an independent candidate. One Detroit contributor Stephen Henderson of American Black Journal sat down with the mayor to talk about his successes and challenges over the years and the current state of the city.
You have 10 months left in your term as mayor. I can remember really clearly your announcement that you were going to seek the role of mayor in 2013. A lot has changed since then. The city is a really, really different place. At the same time, for some people, it's not as changed as we might hope it should be. I want to start with you just kind of giving us an overall picture of where you think things are in the city as you prepare to leave it for other things, and talk about that gap that still exists and what levers the mayor can or should be pulling to address those kinds of things, as well as celebrate things like the draft and the train station.
Well, the things that we try to do every day, of course. In 2014, the ambulances didn't show up for an hour. Half the street lights were out. The children couldn't play in the park because the grass wasn't cut all summer. We had a 20% unemployment rate. And it has been every day trying to create opportunities for all Detroiters. So that's what we've been about. Some of the things have been covered more visibly than others, but if you were in our staff meetings, we are just as focused on the fact that we built $1.2 billion in new affordable housing just in the last 6 years. Every single one of those was a project that took a good deal of work, but we're very conscious of the fact of creating a city where there's room for everybody.
What do you see as the opportunity for the next mayor to build on what's happening, and what do you see as the challenges, the things that person's gonna have to do more of or be more aggressive about to move things faster?
You know, the only hesitation I had, and I by and large feel like I did what I came to do in 12 years was enough, is what is happening with the violence rate is remarkable. I mean, almost 400 homicides the year before I ran, down to 200 last year. We're down again so far this year. Boston last year had 28. It is possible to get violence down. We're using a number of the Boston tactics. We've added a number of our own that other cities are copying. But Boston got there through 20 years of sustained strategy. And I'm hoping that whoever succeeds me sticks with the commitment we've made to the community policing, to the use of technology, to the use of the community violence intervention teams. The strategies that we have put together are driving the violence down, but it needs to be continued for another 10 years. I'd love to see the day when there's not 100 homicides in the city of Detroit. And I do think I will live to see that day.
I talk a lot about the really great things that are happening with investment and development in the city, and the need to connect that more directly with what's happening to people in other parts of the city, even just as a demonstration to say this and this are related. In other words, it's connected. It's one city, not two. How can you do that? Is that possible?
I think the 600 block club presidents of the city would greatly disagree with what you just said.
Would they? Why?
Absolutely. They've had, again, the property values across this city have tripled in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
I mean, they haven't gone up. They've tripled.
Right.
I mean, they've been leading America, and that's because recovery has spread to every corner. But I will take you down Kercheval near McClellan, that was pretty much an abandoned zone 10 years ago, that is now filled with shops and housing. Mm-hmm. Take you down Rosa Parks, which was the site of the violence in '67, and you'll see a church has now been renovated as a very active restaurant community center. We can go down McNichols near Livernois, where 5 years ago, every one of those storefronts was covered by plywood.
Was closed.
Now we have a new merchant bank. We've got new housing going up because the adjoining neighborhoods are there. Take you through neighborhood after neighborhood. East Warren, go check out Warren near Cadue and how that is as opposed to 5 years ago. All the new housing and restaurants, and they are driven by neighborhood groups, block clubs, and we are seeing a neighborhood development like we haven't seen in decades. And I do think people see that. Has it gotten to every corner of the city? No, but I never thought I'd see Dexter with what is happening there today, which will be, I think, the next recovering corridor in the city. And so I'm really proud of what's happened. We just opened over across from Clark Park.
Yep.
Beautiful La Jolla Gardens. And that park is spectacular. Again, that neighborhood, I can go one after another. So when you say your neighborhood where you built on over in Tuxedo, I mean, did you ever think you'd see carpentry schools down the street?
Absolutely not. But then, of course, you hear from folks who are saying, when is my turn? When is it going to happen where I live?
Probably the neighborhood that said that to me the most was the Midwest neighborhood over near Tyerman and Livernois.
Yeah.
When we put the Joe Louis Greenway through there and opened it, and everybody along that greenway is fixing up their house. We actually have new houses being built in that neighborhood adjacent to the greenway. And that greenway is winding through abandoned railroad track that have been covered with scrap tires. So again, I take issue with your statement that we aren't getting to neighborhoods. I'm in these neighborhoods all the time with people who are very proud.
The next mayor is going to take office in the second year of the second Trump administration. Things were really different for the last 4 years for Detroit, partially because of COVID, but also partially because of the relationship that you were able to take advantage of with the White House. Talk a little bit about how that changes and what that means for leadership in the city in terms of maintaining that momentum.
It just means that you have to run the city in a normal way. We did not have problems when Trump was the president. We were operating just fine. I stayed
How did you make that possible?
Again, we just did our jobs.
Yeah.
I stayed off his radar screens. I didn't pick fights with him. I didn't tweet and attack him. My style is not calling attention to myself by picking partisan fights. But we had, for example, demolition money that was awarded under Obama that continued through 2 years out of Trump.
Yeah.
We continued to manage it properly, and Trump didn't bother us at all. Ben Carson, was from the city of Detroit. I had him and his wife Candy over to the Manoogian for dinner, and we got funding to get lead out of houses in Southwest Detroit. There are ways to build relationships with the other party. Now, Joe Biden was a 1 in a million relationship between me and him. We're just very close personally, and it paid off for us in a big way. But we were doing just fine as a city before COVID hit under Trump.
You don't worry about the money not being the same. I mean, there's a lot of money coming to Detroit in the last 4 years in particular.
So most cities in America, when they got the American Rescue Plan money, poured it into their general fund to cover their deficits. In Detroit, we weren't running deficits. Even in COVID, we were running in the black. So every dollar that we took in, we spent on things that would have 10 years of value. We redid parks, we built rec centers, we took out the Packard plant, for example, things that are going to have long-term benefit. So the city is not going to have to ratchet down And council was very responsible in all this, understanding we're going to use one-time money for one-time things. There's a lot of cities in this country that are right now looking at deficits in the next year because they didn't do that.
Yeah.
In the city of Detroit, we're looking at a city that's going to be left with $500 or $600 million in rainy day funds and reserves and a balanced budget. So
you're not worried about some of the other initiatives from Washington. If they ratchet that down, that's not...
Yeah, it's a fight we have every year.
Yeah.
So if they cut funding for affordable housing, every city in America is going to have to push back on that. If they cut funding for transit, every city in America is going to have to fight back on that. But Detroit's not going to be unique. We'll be dealing with the same issues as everybody else.
Are there departments that you worry about in terms of their functioning under new leadership?
I don't know about new leadership. We still are not where we should be in the permitting to open a new business in this town.
Everybody says that.
And so we are a lot better than where we were. You could now at least do your forms online and not have to stand in 4 different lines in City Hall. But I have the team now that is benchmarking the most efficient cities in Michigan. And I said, I don't want you to tell me you made it a little bit better than it was before.
Yeah.
I want you to show me the best city in Michigan on permitting, and I want you to show me every step. Why do we have a step they don't have? Why do we have a fee they don't have? I think getting the culture of B-Seed to make the permitting of new businesses a competitive advantage is something that I haven't gotten to effectively enough, something that I would be doing. A new mayor is going to have to deal with that, although I hope in the next 10 months to get them certainly a running start. But when I think about the things that haven't gotten done, Detroit Promise just aggravates the heck out of me that we have not made this a part of the culture.
The college scholarships for graduates.
Every kid in this city who goes to high school in the city has their college tuition guaranteed. And I just met with a group of 18 to 22-year-olds over at New Lab the other day, saying, how many of you knew at 13 and 14, it was there by 12th grade, your counselor's running around.
Sure.
And one of the women there says, I moved from Kalamazoo. In Kalamazoo, I knew at 7 years old about the Kalamazoo Promise that I can go to college.
Yeah.
And we've done a lot of billboard and radio ads. We have not gotten into the schools and gotten people to understand that you have an enormous advantage being born in Detroit that your college is paid for. Mm-hmm. I haven't done a good enough job of that. And so that's something I'm going to work on this year. The next mayor has an enormous potential advantage. If you get every 7 and 8-year-old in the city to know when they run into their friends from the suburbs, I'm going to college.
Yeah, right.
It changes the culture of the city.
March is Women's History Month, and recently we lost one of the nation's most widely read female poets. Nikki Giovanni passed away last December at the age of 81. She first gained popularity during the civil rights and black arts movement in the 1960s and 70s. One Detroit contributor, Cecelia Sharpe of 90.9 WRCJ, had the opportunity to talk with Giovanni at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History during one of her public appearances last year.
I wanted to start this conversation going back to your first reading at Birdland. And that story was really interesting to me about how that came to be. Can you recount that moment for our viewers?
I'll never forget, my mother is a jazz fan. And so when my second book came out, Black Judgment, I thought, well, what would be the most perfect place to have the debut of that book? And I thought Birdland. And Birdland was down. That's in the old days when Birdland was down. And it's New York, you know, and of course the New York Times was up. So a lot has changed since then. But I just went and went down because on Mondays, almost nobody's in the clubs, and I just went downstairs and said, you know, I'd like to meet Mr. Logan, because that's who Logan and Wilson Pickett owned Birdland.
Okay.
And he said, I'm Harold Logan, who are you? And I'm Nikki Giovanni, I'm a poet, and I'd like to have a reading at your club. And he just looked at me like, what? And I said, well, you know, you're closed on Sunday. That's in the old days when they were closed on Sunday. Said you're closed on Sunday, so I was thinking to have a reading at your club on Sunday. It's okay with you. And he said, well, what you gonna pay me? I said, oh, Mr. Logan, I don't have any money, I'm a poet. You know, that's a silly question. And so he thought about it for a minute. I guess he said, if that fool is crazy enough to come down here and ask me. He said, well, I tell you what, you bring me 100 people, and you can have the club. 99 people, and you owe me $500. I said, well, thank you, and we shook hands. It's one of those like, oh, was that wise? And so I started working on it. You know, you get 100 people to do anything, but well, you can. But where the club is and the way it goes. So on Sunday, I had Morgan Freeman as my next door neighbor, Novella Nelson, Barbara Antier. So I knew a lot of people, and they all agreed to read. And so the line started, and then the line turned. And when they did that, the New York Times was wondering, well, what are those mostly black people doing down there? So they sent a reporter down, and he said, you know, I'm looking for Nick Giovanni. And he finally got to me. He said, I'm looking for Nick Giovanni. I said, well, I'm Nikki Giovanni. He said, no, where is he? It's just the way people looked at things. I said, well, I figure he'll find out eventually.
He'll figure it out.
Yeah,
he'll get
figure
the picture.
It out. But they did, because of the line and everything, it got headline in the, what they call the extra, the second, because nobody had seen a poet bring that, you know, to bring that many people into a club. It was great.
So you held up your end of the deal. You didn't owe Mr. Logan $500.
No.
You brought over 100 people.
Oh, yeah, much over.
And a new audience to Birdland. I want to fast forward to today when the truths are not being told about history, books are being banned. You seek to continue to share the truth about history. Your documentary, Going to Mars, definitely reflects an accurate depiction of history. But you just recently worked with Javon Jackson from the Jazz Messengers on a project, The Gospel According to Nikki Giovanni, where you present sacred or gospel hymns and jazz. What was the importance to you of focusing on those particular genres?
Well, first of all, I was a good friend of Nina Simone, and one of her favorite songs was Night Song. So I thought, wouldn't it be nice to do something with it? And Javon had said, I had said to Javon, you know, we ought to do something, spirituals or something together. And he said, you know, I was thinking the same thing. I don't know if he was or wasn't, or just trying to be nice. But we decided, let's do it. He said, why don't you send me 10 or 12 tunes? And I sent them, but the only song that was not a spiritual was Night Song. And I said, this is this is one of Nina's songs, which I knew because I knew Nina. And it's the only song, because I can't sing. And I said that to him, I'm not a singer, but this is a song I want to sing. And he called me back. He said, well, Nick, you know, there's a lot of people that making records that can't sing, so you're not alone. I said, Javon, I don't know if we should say it like that. I really love him.
So we've taken these words, these stories, and put it into this documentary. It's a must-see, Going to Mars, the Nikki Giovanni Project. And it does a great job of reflecting on the past, examining the present, and taking a little sneak peek into the future, telling the story of your life. I watched it and I could not watch it without stopping and pressing rewind over. I didn't make it past the first 30 minutes. I was pressing rewind over and over again and just taking in the content. And I promise if you watch it again, you're gonna learn something new. How did you initially feel about having a documentary about your life created?
I was against it, and Rada Studio and Joe Brewster and Michelle Stevens brought that to us, but to come to me, you have to go through Jenny Fowler because she handles all of that. And Michelle called Jenny and said, we'd like to do this documentary. We run a small, our office is small, it's 3 people, and Gloria is the other as our attorney. And so I said, well, I'm gonna call Gloria and see what she thinks. Because Jenny had already said, I want it, I think you should do it. And I called Gloria, and Gloria, Nick, Nick, you should do it. So I was like, how did I get outvoted in my own company? But I was outvoted, so I just got out of the way. And I would say that to any artist, anywhere. I did my work because I created the work. Mm-hmm. And I had to have some faith in the people that were gonna do something else with it. And I did. I had faith that Jenny and Gloria are gonna make the right decision because that's what they do. We've been together for 50 years or more now. And it was just important to I don't know film, so it was important for me not to do something that I don't know. So I just stepped back and let them do it. So they were the ones. Michelle essentially was the one that thought, okay, this is what's important because I'm a space freak. And I know that as we go to the future, honestly, there has to be life in the galaxy, because anything else is illogical. And I would say that if I were teaching the class, when I was teaching, to think that only third planet from the yellow sun is the only life in this galaxy is illogical. It doesn't work. It's wrong. And if that's illogical, that means that you have to look for what is the other life. And what I think that we need to be telling our children, Nina says to be young, gifted, and black, but it's a little, I think that we need to remind life forms, us, on this planet, that we are all earthlings, and that what we share is not the color of our skin, or our gender, or our religion. None of these things. What we share is that we live on this planet, which means we should treat each other better. And I think we should start in preschool to say, when the kids say, who are you? The answer is, I'm an earthling. So that when they go into, because somebody's going, we have people in space, and somebody's going beyond that into the galaxy. And when some other life form says, who are you? The answer has to be, we're earthlings, because nothing else will make sense to them. If we said, oh, I come from Detroit, they'd be looking at you like, what? I mean, they're not against it, but what? What's a Detroit?
Our basic form is we're an earthling, we're human beings.
We're an earthling.
Yeah.
And then we say, and where are you? I'm a Jupiterian.
Right. So
but I'm a big fan of Mars. So, because we know that there was water on Mars. That we know because we can see it. If you look at Mars, you can see where the rivers were.
Right. Where the
and
so
again, logically speaking, Mars burned itself up, which we, actually speaking, are in danger of doing, because it only takes a couple of nuclear bombs and we're gone.
Right.
And we'll be the same way. And so you have to learn what else is out there, what do we learn from what is out there, and how do we learn to get along with it, which is why the documentary starts with the only way to understand space is through black women.
Well, I was wondering if, before you leave, if you would read a poem for us from your book.
Oh, I'd be delighted. I suppose living in a materialistic society, luxury to some would be having more than what you need. Living in an electronic age, seeing the whole world by pushing a button to the nth degree might perhaps be adequately represented by having someone there to push the buttons for you. I have thought, if only I could become rich and famous, I would live luxuriously in New York, knowing famous people, eating in expensive restaurants, calling long distance anytime I want. But you held me one evening, and now I know the ultimate luxury of your love.
St. Patrick's Day is Monday, but the holiday fun gets started this weekend in Metro Detroit. Plus, there are plenty of other entertaining events taking place around town. Dave Wagner and Cecelia Sharpe from 90.9 WRCJ have today's One Detroit Weekend.
Hey everyone, Dave and I are thrilled to give you some ideas for local excursions this weekend and beyond. So Dave, what do you have first on your list?
Well, Cecelia, Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater makes its stop at the Detroit Opera House Friday, March 14th through March 16th. The company will be performing different programs depending on the day, so check out the website and take the quiz to figure out which performance you want to see, or just see them all.
Now on Saturday, March 15th, Dude Dad's on Thin Ice tour comes to the Royal Oak Music Theater, where Taylor Calmus brings his relatable comedy about parenthood to the stage.
Of course, Monday is St. Patrick's Day, and Detroit has an abundance of shamrock-filled festivities to attend, like the Detroit Shamrock Festival at the Detroit Festival Grounds, Saturday, March 15th. There will be live music, food trucks, a giant heated tent, and beer to enjoy.
Ooh. Mm-hmm. And the tradition of Detroit St. Patrick's Day Parade continues on Sunday, March 16th in Corktown. It is one of the country's largest St. Patrick's Day celebrations.
Well, let's hope we get some good weather this weekend. It's always the luck of the Irish, right?
Yep.
And if you had your fill of St. Patrick's fun by March 17th, then head over to Aretha's Jazz Cafe to enjoy a night of jazz with Sky Covington's Satin Doll Review.
Of course, there's so much else to do this St. Patrick's Day weekend, so stay tuned for a few more of our favorite picks. Have a fantastic weekend.
That'll do it for this week's One Detroit. Thanks for watching. Head to the One Detroit website for all the stories we're working on. Follow us on social media and sign up for our weekly newsletter.
From Delta faucets to Behr paint, Masco Corporation is proud to deliver products that enhance the way consumers all over the world experience and enjoy their living spaces. Masco, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
Support also provided by the Cynthia and Edsel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit PBS.
DTE Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit PBS. Among the state's largest foundations committed to Michigan-focused giving, we support organizations that are doing exceptional work in our state. Learn more at dtefoundation.com.
Nissan Foundation, and viewers like you.